Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry to do this laying down, but I can't. I'm very weak and I can't. Sorry. I think the video I did last night, I'm going to be able to upload to here, and I'll give you the URL. If you don't want to listen to it, please just save it. Sorry. There may come a day when it will be useful to you. Boy, I'm doing really good at this so far. I have no way to tell you what the destruction of hope one of the things I hope that we can do, and it's something that you might think about trying in the future. There's an organization called Playing for Change. There are musicians all over the world, and they do these amazing recordings of children from countries everywhere. Like there's one of their songs is "What a Wonderful World." I can't. See, there's a problem going on here, and part of it is the fault of the religions. Buddhism has come to mean you just like seek out some kind of void inside yourself, and you don't have to care about anything that goes on around you. It's all about you. And it's the same way with this idea of self-realization and enlightened self-realization in Hinduism. It's all about you. If it's all about you and it's not about God, then I don't know how you can reach a godly state. I really don't understand the concept that the Vedic scholars are pushing, that everything's a void, and that when we become realized, we just enter the void, and that's the end of it. You just sort of dissipate into nothingness. I told one guru, a very popular one, that if that was the case, then why don't we just all get drunk and party and do whatever we want to do? If all we're going to do is just disappear into some void, that's not the way it is. Yes, there is a void. The Vedas are right, there is a void. It's outside of creation. Creation springs from the void. And creation is very big. It has a lot of planes and a lot of parts to it. It's not just heaven and hell. And it's all wrong. Why are they teaching people wrong things? Oh, I know why. So they can look at your videos and say, oh, well, that's just karma. That's it. If God didn't want it that way, it wouldn't be that way. It's bullshit. God does not want this. God would never, ever wish harm to any child. Every child is precious. I'm sorry, but I've lived this all my life, and I know how bad things are there. I've seen it now. I had no idea. I had this idea in my head that India was going to be a haven, a place where I could draw a breath, just teach the way of love and have it respected. And I find out that they're murdering people, murdering my people, God's people. Everything. I don't know this anyway. I was on what they call here hospice care for a year. I couldn't even breathe. I had nurses all the time. And there was no compassion at all. It was just like, come to my house and ask me questions and find out how fast I'm dying and shove a bunch of... The first thing they did was give me 2 cartons of morphine. I told them, I said, I'm not taking morphine. I've avoided taking hard drugs all my life so I can take morphine for you. So I refused that. And it was very clear at the end of the year that I wasn't dying fast enough for them. So I decided, I said, well, look, you know, I'll voluntarily just do this by myself. Because obviously I'm not dying fast enough for you, and it's a problem. So what they did was, they had a rule that no, if you decide that you don't want hospice care anymore, nobody can talk to you ever again. None of the nurses, none of the volunteers, and everybody's supposed to just walk away and abandon you, and that's what they did. I had one minister who worked for them, who every other week was coming usually. Sorry. It isn't what it is, but it is what it means. But he was bringing me the Eucharist every other week, which is communion. And it was the only spiritual comfort I've been allowed for so long. I'm sorry. So I asked him if he could just put it in an envelope, leave it in the mailbox. He said they wouldn't let him. I asked him, can you get a volunteer from your congregation? They could just leave it in my mailbox. They don't even have to see me. Just give me this one thing. No, they won't let me. I'll lose my job. Well, my attitude was, I thought you worked for God. Guess not, huh? I played church organ for 50 years. I served in every congregation. I didn't care if it was Catholic or Episcopal or Methodist. I just was playing for God. I giving my music and service to Him. When I was first sick and I moved to this apartment, there's a Presbyterian church right next door. And for 50 years, I had a key to the church. Anyway, that year when I was out of hospice, I called several times to that church because I figured I'm right next door. And maybe they would let me just come over and play the piano, because that's how it's one of the ways I communicate with God. And I could walk that far. So finally, after about 6 months, and every time I called, I told him that I was dying. And, I thought maybe the minister would call me. But 6 months, finally, she did. And I told her what my situation was, and I asked her, I said, just, with the secretaries said they're working or whatever, could we make a time so I could just come and play? Just me and God. She told me that the church was all locked up and they didn't allow anybody in there because of COVID. I'm like, God's not going to catch anything. And nobody's going to catch anything from me. I haven't left my house in 2 years. The answer was no. There was a time when I used to go to Mass, and one day I was at Mass, and an elderly woman came up to me, and she said, "You are the person I need to talk to." I'm like, "What do I do now?" She says, "Well, I'm going to have to retire from being head of the Legion of Mary. Legion of Mary is an organization that honors the Blessed Mother. Just in case you don't know, I know you're Muslim, you don't believe in this stuff. But you do know who Mary is. It honors Mary. It honors your Heavenly Mother. It's a symbol." Anyway, stupid me, I say, I'm a sucker for old ladies, for one thing. I say, okay, I'll come. And so I started going to the meetings. So there's a bunch of doctors and stuff in there whose daughters are nurses. So here I am in this meeting, and they're saying, now, I have to explain something. The Catholic Church has what they call, what are they called? They're sacred rites. One of them is the Eucharist, communion, and one of them is baptism, and one of them is a rite that they do just before you die. It's called last rites. And it's really, really, really important to people who really believe. And what was being reported in this meeting was that priests weren't going anymore. They just decided they didn't have enough priests and they weren't going to be bothered. So the nursing homes where people are isolated and alone and dying by themselves, and these are people that were faithful all of their lives to the church. They were going. When it came time for them to die, they had no comfort. They had nothing. Well, I was like really astounded by this. So I wrote the bishop. You remember him. We already know he doesn't like me very much. But anyway, I wrote the bishop a letter. And also, it was the month of May. The month of May is the month when we honor our mothers, including the Holy Heavenly Mother. And I went to church the whole month of May, and there wasn't a single mother got him. There wasn't a single, usually they have a procession and this whole beautiful thing. It's a beautiful celebration. Nothing. So I also mentioned that maybe we ought to get back to doing some of that. Because when we lose the traditions, we start losing people's faith. They have nothing to cling to. Well, I didn't get a letter back. Well, what I got was a call from the vicar. His name is Father Joe, and he is not a priest that I consider to be really a priest. But anyway, he called me back and he gave me an argument for 2 hours. And he told me there was absolutely no way that they were going to do the last rites. And if those people in the nursing homes, if they wanted to have that sacrament, they could come to the church. They do it once a year. I'm like, oh, they're in the nursing home. They don't go anywhere. They're sick. Well, that's their problem. Okay, so I asked him about Mary, and he said, it's my job to do the liturgy, and if I don't feel like mentioning the Mother, the Holy Mother, if I don't feel like mentioning it during the month of May, I'm not going to. I'm like going, well, aren't you an arrogant son of a bitch? So I moved into an apartment. It was about a block from that same church. Obviously, I didn't continue with the Legion of Mary, and I told them that, unless they were going to stand up to the bishop's office and tell them they expect this to happen, then I was out of there. And they weren't willing to. Catholics are such a bunch of little sheep. Lemmings, just they go right off the cliff. We're in the middle of the sexual abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. And I go to Sunday Mass, and Father Joe is obviously homosexual, and every little boy in the church is running up, and he's hugging on him and everything else, and I'm thinking, what are you people thinking? Tell him to keep his hands off your children. I can't say he's doing anything or not, but there's an awful lot of them doing anything going on. Don't let other people do that with your children. Especially when they're obviously, these are little boys, and this guy's gay, and there's an opportunity for abuse there. Don't allow your children to be put in a situation where there is any kind of opportunity for abuse. Learn from the past. thousands of children broken and destroyed, their faith destroyed in God because of a homosexual culture in the Catholic Church. And obviously, from my experience, it had any respect for vulnerable women either. It's everywhere, is what I'm saying. Once you're born into this world as an orphan, you might as well just hang it up. Because you're just nothing but garbage. You're something to be used and abused and thrown away like a used Kleenex. And that's what my experiences were as a child. Even in my adopted home, I had to lock myself. All of my teenage years I spent locked in a little tiny closet to keep myself from being raped. Every day. It wasn't even safe at school because my father was the principal of the school and he made sure he had his office in the same building where I was. I couldn't even have the luxury of having any friends. I was terrified 24 hours a day. There was never a minute that I wasn't in danger. When I was 16, I was so scared and shattered. I went to see, I had a boyfriend by then, and I went to see his minister because I thought maybe it was somebody I could talk to finally. And he tried to rape me. I was lucky to get out of his car and get away. And of course I could tell anybody. Who you could tell? The people that are abusing me at home? The people that are never going to believe me at school because my father owns the place? Bondage. Constant bondage. There wasn't 1 minute of peace. My mother was a monster. She treated us to scalding hot water enemas as punishment. Degradation, humiliation. There was never a minute without it. I was afraid to open my mouth. I used to play music. Every spare minute I had, I just played music. Because at least then I was free in God. I was just a child. I didn't ask to be born into this hell. Every day. And you can pause this and you can walk away and you cannot listen to it at all, my dear sweet son, because it's too much to bear. My mother and father, when I was born, my mother was a barroom drunk. She was nothing but a whore. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. I have 18 half-brothers and sisters. I went back and found my family. All of them broken. All of them destroyed by abandonment and the foster care system. That is nothing but a way to funnel children for prostitution and slavery. My sisters, their names were Mary and Sally. They're not my only sisters, but I didn't know them then. They were the only ones in the situation with me. They were older than me. I was the little one. And Mary and Sally had already been with our mother and were taken away because she went on a drunk and left them in their cribs. Finally, after about 4 days, some neighbor woman called child welfare, and they came and they found these 2 babies covered with maggots. So at that point, they were put in foster care. And that home was a really good home. The lady and the man were an elderly couple that really loved children, and they wanted to adopt us. And there was another little baby in the home. His name was Jeffrey. He wasn't related to us, but I considered him to be my baby brother. I was just little. I wasn't even 2. And one day, the social worker marched in with our mother, and they lined us up in the middle of the room. And she said that our mother was going to put 2 of us up for adoption, and she could take one of us, and she got to choose. So our mother marched up and down the line to decide who she's going to take, and finally, we're terrified. I mean, terrified. So finally, she grabs a hold of Sally, the oldest one of us, and drags her away. And all I remember seeing is her dragging Sally out the door, kicking and screaming, and Mary behind her kept punching her and kicking and screaming, and everybody was kicking and screaming, and I was so scared I didn't know what to do. So, boy, isn't this a nice nightmare, huh? You want to know what happens to children? I will tell you. I'm a girl child. I know all about it. I've known since I was 2. And so then, after Sally left, and all I can remember of my oldest sister was her little blonde braids and her little face in the back window, and she pounded on the back window screaming as my mother drove her away, and we were told we would never see her again, and we never did. So then, the social worker packs all of our stuff up in the car, along with baby Jeffrey. And Mary and I are huddled together in the back seat with baby Jeffrey. And we pull up in front of this huge building. And the social worker tells us to get out and to bring Jeffrey. And so we follow her, carrying little Jeffrey between us. And we get inside this place, and it's nothing but a great big room full of cribs. It's an orphanage. And the social worker takes Jeffrey and puts him in one of the cribs and tells us to say goodbye because we'll never see him again either. And there you go. And we get back in the car, and this dumb social worker decides that maybe to compensate for all the pain that's gone on. The pain that's gone on, like, you just destroyed everything I ever thought was real. And I'm 2. And I guess they think that people who are 2 don't have any feelings. And we're mentally retarded until we get to be at least 5. I'm sorry, even a child that can't talk yet has feelings and knows what's going on. I can testify for that because I remember all of it. So she decides to take us to a circus. To this day, I can't go to a circus without throwing up. I had no idea what was going on, but why we were being treated to clowns and stuff after we just had our whole life torn up. I mean, I was like, how does a child like even begin to hang on to anything? How do you feel like anything's ever going to be all right again? So I clucked his sister. Finally, the circus was over, and she takes us to this house that we never saw before. And these two teenage boys come barreling out of the house and grab us, drag us in there, and throw us in a black, dark, filthy, dirty room with a dirty mattress and papers on the floor for us to go to the bathroom on. And it was basically the kennel where they kept the dogs. So we lived with the dogs, and we ate on the floor with the dogs. Usually all we had was, in fact, the only thing I ever remember having in those dog dishes was stale bread and milk with a little bit of sugar. Luckily, the dogs let us eat first because dogs are very generous, spirited animals. And they took care of me, and they were the only love I had were those dogs. So one day, the only time I was let out of that room was when the woman wanted me to churn butter or do farm work. And how much can you expect a 2-year-old to do? But if you didn't do it, then you got no food and you got thrown out, locked outside in the cold. Sometimes they locked us out all night when it was freezing cold outside. So I'd go in the barn and sleep with the cows, and the cows would let me snuggle with them too. The only thing I knew was the love of the animal. So anyway, the woman told me to take a glass of lemonade out to the boys who were out in the barn working. And I just little, I don't know any better. So I take the lemonade, and they grabbed me, they tied me up to a stake. And they did all kinds of bad things to me. And when it was over, they took my favorite puppy and they threw gasoline on him and set him on fire and told him that was what was going to happen to me if I ever told. I was only 2. And another time, they were slaughtering pigs. And they hung them up by their feet. And they made my sister and I stand underneath the pig while they killed him. And all the blood just poured down on us, and the pig was squealing. Again, this is a lesson never to tell. We can do anything to you. We can even kill you. And you are nothing. You are garbage. Nobody will care. Then finally, my sister, had started school, and she told them at school what was happening to us. And so they came and they took us out of that house. And she told me, because I don't have any memory of this now, by that time I was so shattered I had stopped talking. And I was an early talker. But I was so shattered, I couldn't even, I don't remember any of it. My sister says I followed her around like a little zombie. And when she went to school and she wasn't there, I would just hide in the corner and wait for her to come back, and then I would follow her around again, but I wouldn't talk. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was terrified. I was frozen with fear. By this time, I had no idea what was going to happen next. From 1 minute to the next. So then one day, sorry, this thing keeps falling off. I have to fix it right, but I'm too sick. And so finally, they came. I was just about 3. And I remember the days the colors came back. We were sitting on the steps of the orphanage, and Mary told me that people were coming to pick us up and we were going to be adopted. I was so happy. And all of a sudden, it was like the world came alive again, and I had hope. How wrong I was. My sister told me, she said, that woman hates us. We don't want to go with them. But I figured at that point anything was better than where we were. I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to be like a normal kid. You know, and the guy that has some family that comes and picks him up at school and gives him hugs, and that guy, I wanted the hope that could happen. But it never did. We went to their house, and the first year wasn't too bad because she wasn't working and she hadn't had her own baby yet. Oh yeah, remember Sarah? You don't want to be adopted and have somebody have their own baby because you stop having any usefulness at all. Then you're nothing but rubbish. And she just, there was nothing that she could do that could show her hatred of us enough. I learned how to read when I was 3. Basically, I taught myself because I had to know. Oh, my chest is hurting. Anyway, I don't like telling you this sad story, but I'm going to chronicle this. Just so you know, because you work with these children. I want you to know how they see the world. And I know you know some because you saw it when you were 12. But at least you had your mother's love that 12 years. You thank Allah every day for that. because He gave you a foundation. Those children out there, that garbage dump, they don't have no foundation. I saw those two little girls and my heart was breaking. I wanted to take them home. Give them a chance at life. So anyway, we're just starting out in the adoptive home, okay? I will close this now, and I'll start a new video when I come back. And I thank you for listening. And if you don't listen, that's okay too, because I wouldn't want to listen to this mess either. Anyway, I love you very much. I mean.